March Madness is here. The NFL free agent frenzy is here. And have you watched any of the small conference, mid-major conference tournaments? Have you noticed? Nobody's there. Nobody's watching these games. And how does that parallel to our own lives as we follow Jesus? What happens when nobody's watching? We unpack it next. Welcome to the Unpacking It podcast, where we unpack parallels, metaphors, and topics in sports that relate to life and faith. I'm Bryce Johnson in downtown Mount Holly, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, joined today by my co-host Trip Smith, and we are fired up. What a wonderful time of year. Starting to get sunny here, warmer. We've got free agents coming to Charlotte to play for the Panthers. We're excited about that, but some big moves around the league. Veterans switching teams, a couple quarterbacks switching teams. And we talked a little bit about this last week on the show, kind of who we wanted to see where. And so we're starting to see some of the results of free agency so far. But we are live today. So any breaking news we'll discuss. Not too many big names left, but we're still wondering about Kyler Murray. And I doubt Aaron Rodgers will make his decision today, but at some point he'll have to figure out where he's going to end up. But he's got, if he does return to Pittsburgh, he's got a couple new weapons there. So we'll have to discuss that as well. And we're going to have some fun talking March Madness. Actually, next week, Trip and I will both be at different ministry conferences. And so we will not be doing a live show next week. We'll keep you posted on kind of content in between. But today's sort of our preview of the tournament a little bit. And then, of course, NFL talk too. But did want to make sure you knew that we were doing the Unpacking It Bracket Challenge fundraiser this year. And so go to unpackingit.com/March. Unpackingit.com/March. And you can already sign up. Of course, the brackets are released this Sunday, Selection Sunday, and then we'll have the contest going on. So the winner of the bracket gets a $500 Amazon gift card. And so definitely encourage you to check out the Unpacking It Bracket fundraiser, support the ministry, support the show, and have fun competing with us as well as other sports fans in the Unpacking It community. All right. Do want to thank our sponsor, Upward Sports. I'll actually be hanging out with them next week at this event that I'll be at, the Reach Gathering. And so bring Upward Sports to your church. From basketball and cheerleading to soccer, flag football, volleyball, baseball, adult running, even pickleball for middle school and high schoolers. Upward Sports offers leagues for every interest and age, flexible, family-friendly. These experiences give your church the tools to engage your community, connect families, and create lasting memories. As the world's largest Christian youth sports organization, partnering with over 1,800 churches nationwide, Upward Sports is ready to help you launch a first-class, organized, and intentional league. Learn more today, upward.org/unpack. All right, before we get to anything, we need to say hello to Trip and ask him how he's feeling about Carolina's loss on Saturday night. Trip, how you holding up over there?
I'm okay, man, because it wasn't a legitimate loss, dude. I don't know. We've talked about this. When the two teams played at full strength, we saw what happened. I'll say it was an absolute gut punch to Carolina to find out that Caleb Wilson is not going to come back this season because of his injury. And he'll do what he should do, the right thing for him, which is he'll enter the draft next year as well. So that means his career at UNC was short-lived. He was a really exciting player. I think he was leading earlier this season the entire NCAA in dunks per game or something like that. And I mean, he was just a good scorer. He a ferocious dunker. I'm excited to see him in the NBA. But ever since I made that sort of that providential, that poor assessment that we know that Carolina was the better of the two teams, Duke and UNC have gone in opposite directions. And Duke looks like, we said it a couple weeks ago, they look like they're peaking at the right time. Now, we did just find out before hopping on today that your boy Foster is now out. They said indefinitely, but really it's the rest of the season. He's got a foot fracture. Is that right?
Yeah, sounds bad. Not good. Not good. But it gives the twin brother Boozer a chance to shine. And so he looked pretty good against Carolina. And so, yeah, I'm optimistic that Duke can still make a run.
I think they're good enough to win the whole thing without him, but it would have been better to have him.
Yeah, but we're going to talk today. This year's March Madness is going to be fascinating because I think there is a clear-cut top team tier, and Duke is in that. But, man, if Arizona's right there. Michigan's right there. We already saw a great matchup between Duke and Michigan. Mm-hmm. I think Florida they're hitting their stride at the right time. They're the reigning champs. They're the team to beat. And then, think back to last year too. Houston, you never write them off. And then we'll see how UConn responds to their kind of tough loss to Marquette over the weekend. But they're right there in the mix too. So one of the things that I noticed throughout college basketball is how often the top seeds or the top rankings throughout the season, do those teams lose kind of bad games, surprising games? It really hasn't happened too often this year. The top teams have been the top teams for most of the year. And when that's the case, then those guys are going to be prepared for deep playoff runs or tournament runs. Now, there are certain seasons where you see the number one seed change all the time, and it's just who's really the top team? And those are the years where we see all the upsets. And so ESPN has an article out did NIL kill the upset? So that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on.
That is an interesting topic of discussion. As you know, I'm strongly against so many of the things that the NIL has done to college sports. But I mean, I will say, let me float this theory to you and see what you think. It does feel like most college basketball seasons, as we get into late February, we have some idea of kind of here are the 10 teams about 10 or so teams that we think have a realistic chance at making a run for the championship. And within that, my theory has always been that if you're one of those 10 teams, you don't want to skate into the tournament too easily, right? You don't want to just run. Occasionally, you'll see just one team that is absolutely dominant. I'm thinking of UConn from a few years ago. But I don't. You don't just want to speed run your conference championship and come into the NCAA tournament on a 20-game winning streak. I do think there's something to be said for this wake-up call late in February. And I sort of wonder if that's maybe what UConn got the other night, a loss to a pretty bad Marquette team.
Yeah.
I think there's something for refocusing as you enter into March Madness and just say, hey, nothing is going to be given to us. We need to continue to be intense, to continue to pay attention, to be a focused and disciplined team. And so that's something that I'm always looking for at this time of the year as I'm thinking about who do I think is going to make a deep run into the bracket. I don't want necessarily a team that has just kind of skated through for a couple of months at a time. And I think Duke has had some adversity. That's probably a good thing for them. That UConn loss for them, I think, probably refocuses them in a nice way. And sometimes I think really savvy coaches will even put their teams in a position where there's a little bit of disparity or just something that they've got to fight against, a storyline that puts a little bit of a chip on their shoulder as they head into the tournament. You think there's something to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the wake-up call, no doubt. And I think for Duke, it's the injuries. And so, certain teams have different levels of adversity. Even for Michigan losing to Duke, sort of
right.
All right, hey,
great example.
Maybe we're not the best team, but hey, now
because before that you would have said, man, these guys look like they might be head and shoulders above everybody, and that loss was a nice reminder. Hey, you got to pay attention every game. You got to be disciplined every week and keep working hard in practice. So I think that's good for a team heading into the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the Duke Carolina game goes, I like when both teams are at full strength. I don't like the excuses. I like going into the game where, hey, either team can win, either team has a chance. Going in Saturday night, it felt like a real long shot for Carolina to even be in that game. But great first half. Duke pulled away, clearly better. The defense was tremendous. But yeah, Caleb Wilson, he seems like a very likable player. So I was actually bummed that he wasn't.
Seems like he's
he
a
wasn't
great.
out there.
What I've heard is he's a great teammate. And your injuries are always going to be a part of sports, man. And so you can never say like, well, we wish we just, except for like the first game of the season, right? You can never say, man, we wish we just had a clean slate where all the rosters were fully healthy. That just never happens. You have to be able to weather the storm of injuries. But man, when you find out just before the game that the guy who is clearly your best player and one of the most exciting players that you've had on the team in the past, I don't know how many years, is done for the season, not just going to miss that game, but done for the season. That's a real sort of morale sort of loss to have coming into that game.
Hard to rally.
And that's to take nothing away from Duke, who I think looks like they're one of the best teams in the country and probably is going to make it a push in the tournament in March Madness.
Yeah, so we got the ACC tournament starting up, and we're going to talk more conference tournaments in just a little bit during this week's devotional as we talk about this concept of nobody's watching. But on Monday, the NFL free agency period officially began. I was listening to NFL radio this morning, and they were talking about Bill Polian was on. This whole idea of like the tampering window is sort of laughable. So anyway, throw it out the window.
Yeah.
It's all a joke, but it's all semantics. But ultimately, players and teams are agreeing on deals. And I found yesterday to be really fascinating and exciting. Deals were coming through. And just on a side note, like, and maybe I'm alone on this, I don't care that these guys make so much money. Like, I know old school people that watched, the NFL years ago or sports in general. Like, I good for them. Good for them. They make a lot of money. They make these big contracts. Like, I'm not shocked by the big money, but I am concerned, like, how do teams spend their money wisely and like, oh, okay, you're going to invest in this position, this type of player. I always, like, for the Panthers, I was excited to get guys that are in their 20s. Like, you want to sign guys that are in their 20s. Right. But the Panthers made a big splash on defense, which is great. For those of you that listen to, Unpacking It and also our fantasy football podcast, we are also all about offense. And there were some moves across the league. I've got one player that jumped out to me that I was most intrigued by kind of going into free agency, and now we see where he lands. So I'm going to share that in a moment. But what about for you? Was there a big move, a big kind of offensive move that caught your attention that you were intrigued by?
I don't know that there's one that jumped out at me. I mean, we had talked about who's going to end up being the Falcons quarterback. We know the answer to that question now is Tua. I think at least at the start of the season, he'll be their starter. And I think that Tua is good enough to really make that team not just relevant, but gonna push to win their division. And I think could be a really strong team. I'll say the one that probably felt the most flashy to me that I think was just finalized today was Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll tell you, I like Kenneth Walker a lot. He's a guy that in the first few years of his career, I was intentional to try to draft him. I thought that he was always a little bit underappreciated. I think from a fantasy football perspective, he will be overdrafted this coming season. I think people are going to see Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker onto perennial favorites, Kansas City Chief. And I think the Chiefs have some rebuilding to do. And Kenneth Walker, it's important to remember, has some real holes in his game. So I'm just making a little mental note after getting sort of excited when I saw that free agency move come across my timeline, that when fantasy season comes around, Kenneth Walker is going to go. He's going to be a top 12 running back. And maybe at the back end of like an RB1, I'd be comfortable taking him. But I think that he will be overdrafted this coming season in fantasy football.
I have to say, I'm a little surprised that the Chiefs signed him.
Me too.
Because he didn't have a great regular season. He had a great Super Bowl. And I couldn't figure out why Seattle wasn't giving him the ball more. I know some injuries and injury history.
It's because he's not a good pass blocker, and he's really not a great receiver either. And
because Charbonnet was catching the ball in the backfield, and so
Charbonnet was the better pass protector and the better pass catcher. And I think those things really matter for the Kansas City Chiefs when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback. Both of those things really matter.
But what I don't understand is, in general, over the years, the guys that win the Super Bowl end up getting paid the Super Bowl premium. And this also happens like in the NBA draft, where guys go earlier in the draft when they just played in the championship, like, or they went deep into March Madness because they're just like, they're fresh on your mind, whatever. So for the Chiefs to be that team, usually it's like the random team, like I don't know, the Cardinals. They go out and sign the big player that was awesome in the Super Bowl and overpay for them. So I'm just surprised that the Chiefs were that team to do that for Walker.
I'm surprised as well. And I think that there are some signs that the Chiefs are acting more out of maybe like desperation, right? Or
they lost their defense too.
Right.
The Rams now have their defense.
They've got some real problems, and everybody just thinks Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. Kelce announced that he's coming back for another season. Again, we said coming into this last football season, the Chiefs are going to have a down year, and we were right about that. And I still think that they have some real rebuilding to do. And you're right. The move of going out and getting Kenneth Walker and paying him the money that they paid him, to me, is more indicative of a team that is frustrated and sort of freaked out about the running back struggles that they've had over the past few seasons, instead of being thoughtful and forward thinking about what they actually need to do to patch up the most important holes on their roster and to start building a new dynasty. When Mahomes is your quarterback, you're always going to be in contention in every game and every season. But I think if you had to ask me right now, I don't know what their over-under for win total will be this season, but if you had to ask me this coming season, let's say for the Chiefs, over-under 11 wins, I think I might take the under. I think there's reason to be concerned about what they're doing.
Yeah, I see Paul, our loyal Chiefs fan, jumping in on the conversation, and he sounds concerned as well.
Me too. Yes, Paul. All right, there we go.
So
good to hear that from somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, instead of just me over here pontificating.
Well, diehard Chiefs fans are in the mix, but no, I think from the outside looking in, that it seems to what are they doing? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing back the enemy. They're trying to recapture something from a few years ago. Still riding Kelce. But the speaking of tight ends, here's the player that I was most interested going into free agency, and it's Isaiah Likely. Because here's what I wanted to know. For the last handful of years, the Ravens have had Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And for the most part, Mark Andrews has been their guy, and Likely has been a nice little extra tight end, more of a fill-in guy when Andrews has been out. And so what I wanted to know was, would Likely go somewhere else, another team that buys the hype of Likely, which then indicates, the Ravens weren't really in on him. Maybe that's why they kept Andrews versus investing in Likely, the younger player. Or would John Harbaugh and the Giants get him? And that's what happened. So the fact that John Harbaugh said, hey, this is the guy we need, and the Giants didn't get a ton of free agents yesterday, but they got Likely. And so to me, that indicates Likely's the real deal. That I think Likely going to New York, they let Bellinger go. They still have that one other tight end who's pretty good. I can't think of it. Theo Johnson.
Theo Johnson, yeah. Which is not a bad
1-2
tight end. Yeah, right.
But Likely being the real threat. So anyway, from a fantasy standpoint, from an intrigue standpoint, that's the guy for me, because I just didn't know the last few years. It's wait, was he just kind of stuck behind Andrews? He hasn't put up huge numbers. He had the one big game 2 years ago, and everybody in fantasy got all excited about him. So he's the name that I'm going to keep an eye on for fantasy drafts, and just with Harbaugh getting his guy.
Yeah, I mean, let's go with the inverse of what we just said about the Chiefs. Talk about a team that people have big expectations for that I think will underperform this coming season. I think that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Talk about a team that maybe people have low expectations about who may really surprise some people this coming season. I think that's the New York Giants. They got Harbaugh as their coach now. We didn't see, why is his name slipping my mind? The first rounder that they picked on defense, the defensive end, Penn State guy. Who am I talking about?
Yeah.
You think that over while I continue to talk about the Giants, a team that I care very little about. But Harbaugh is going to be a good coach for them. Malik Neighbors has had plenty of time. Abdul Carter. Malik Neighbors has had plenty of time to recover from his injury. We expected more from this defense last year than they ended up getting out of Carter and those other guys. I think the question for the Giants is as long as Jackson Dart stays healthy, then you're talking about Malik Neighbors, one of the best receivers in the NFL, without question. Two tight ends who are kind of freaky athletes who could be really good. A really solid defense. I think an offensive line that played okay last year. So they make a few more acquisitions and some smart moves in the draft. I think you could really see the Giants surprise some people this coming season. I'm kind of excited, cautiously excited for them.
I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of hype for him, but I'm on the bandwagon.
Maybe as the season approaches, you're right.
I think the hype is there, and it should be.
Jackson Dart can just learn to take care of his body and his brain and just not dive.
Same with Scadaboo.
Well, I mean, is Scadaboo even going to be back? That was a devastating injury. Is he going to be ready at the start of the season?
Well, as far as I know, they haven't signed another running back yet either. So maybe they trust Tracy. But there were a couple names potentially linked to them. And so speaking of running backs, Travis Etienne goes to the Saints. Kenneth Gainwell goes to the Bucks. Rico Dowdle goes to the Steelers. Also Michael Pittman goes from the Colts to the Steelers. Do any of those moves jump out to you as intriguing?
I still think that Etienne is a pretty good running back who just had some tough.
Still pretty young too.
He's younger than you think. Seems like he's been around forever, and he does sort of he gives hints of Alvin Kamara. So I can imagine. It's easy for me to imagine him in a Saints uniform performing well for the Saints. And again, if Shuck is really what he gave some signs of being this past season, they could be an interesting team. I really think that the NFC South could be kind of a interesting. It always is because of how bad the teams are. But this year it could be interesting because of how good the teams are with the Saints, with the Falcons, the Panthers making some moves on defense. They look like they could have a really solid defense to go along with a serviceable offense. And so that could be a fun division where maybe it's a tight race for the playoffs because the teams are actually good this year instead of all of them trying to figure out which one's going to be the least bad, so yeah, I mean,
should be improved.
Interesting RB moves there. And, I do think that Rodgers is going to end up back with the Steelers. And so Pittman and Dowdle added to that team. It kind of can I ask you a question? You remember Caleb Johnson? Does anybody remember Caleb Johnson, the running back drafted for the Steelers? Does that Dowdle move just signal that he's done for, that no one believes in him? Because he was highly touted coming into the NFL.
Well, I'm a little surprised they let Gainwell go because he was such a good fit for them.
Well, they still have Jalen Warren, who I really like. And Caleb Johnson was supposed to be something. Who's the leading running back in that backfield? I don't think Dowdle goes there unless they have a conversation. You got a chance to be our top guy.
Well, it's a 1-2 punch. In the NFL, you want two guys.
Backs,
So Warren and Dowdle's not bad. And then really for Pittman and now DK Metcalf to be 1A, 1B, I like that combination.
Those are two very good receivers.
The Steelers, those are very solid moves for them. Of course,
hope springs eternal.
Yes.
This time of year, you just the optimism that you can have about just about any one of these teams that we've named is so high. I mean, the Raiders are making some smart moves in free agency, and they're not. I see that face you're making. They're not like they're not the glamorous headline on the front page of the NFL page on ESPN.com. But I think they're just making some solid moves to shore up some areas of need. I'm not saying that they're going to turn it around in one season, but I think there are signs that they're being thoughtful about the way that they're building.
I'm not buying the Raiders. I'm out on the Raiders. Mendoza, I don't see it. And I understand a couple good moves for sure, but they're so far. Well, dude, I do like Genty. I like Genty and Bowers.
Yeah, right. Do you remember?
I do.
Right. Do you remember what the sort of attitude about the Raiders coming into the season was? I think there was a lot of optimism this season. And then things just totally collapsed. Geno didn't play as well. Pete Carroll just seemed to have lost a step as a coach. It hurts that they lost Max Crosby, but I do think at least they're building in a right direction after just an absolutely terrible, just a miserable season for the Raiders. So don't hear me saying that they're going to make the playoffs this coming year, but I think they're making some smart moves in free agency as well.
Well, the Chargers are on the rise, and they had a nice little free agent start. And then, of course, the Broncos are right there in the mix. And then even though the Chiefs, we expect to, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be as great as they have been. They're still better than the Raiders. So the Raiders are far. They're far.
I guess the takeaway is you can just kind of talk yourself into anything at this time of year with your favorite team.
It's true. Last thing, though, I will say, as a Panthers fan, I appreciate what Dan Morgan has done since taking over as general manager, where he targets players and he just goes and gets them.
Mm-hmm.
And he pays for them. Now, last year, there was a lineman that New England paid more for. Maybe in some ways he learned from that. But he went out there and said, all right, people want Jalen Phillips. We'll pay more. We're bringing him here.
Yeah.
And then Devin Lloyd, he kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit. And then last night, the Panthers snagged him too to fill the need at linebacker. So
he's a great player.
The aggressiveness and the willingness to pay for key positions of need is huge. And the Panthers, I love their approach. And so they are a team on the rise.
Yeah.
Very encouraged by that. So, and Lloyd's a stud.
If you live here in Charlotte, do you feel like we get excited and we get so optimistic and we sort of, the way we talk about our teams right now, the way we talk about the Panthers and the Hornets is as if they're a top tier sort of pushing for a championship. And it's like, we're just so excited to have a team that might be in the mix, that might sneak into the playoffs in either one of those leagues, man. And I hope that we can push beyond just sort of like upper middle class into teams that are really relevant on the national scene and can teams you can talk about as making a push in the playoffs.
You know, it's
Am
funny.
I too pessimistic there?
No, I'm so optimistic about my teams right now that I'm looking at my wardrobe saying, I don't have enough.
Yeah.
I don't have enough gear.
That's the litmus test. Yes.
I need more gear.
I do the same thing. That's good.
Because I have I have certain like long sleeve or maybe a polo of one team, but like I'm a little light on my Hornets gear.
Uh-huh.
It's like I need another.
I was looking at Brandon Miller jerseys
Hornets
this
gear.
week, man. I'd love to have a Brandon Miller jersey.
So I'm not a big jersey guy other than hanging behind me. So I don't wear jerseys.
I don't know that I've ever owned a basketball jersey, but I think I might buy a purple Brandon Miller jersey. I'm feeling it, dude.
I can't wear the sleeveless tank tops. That's not a good look for me.
I'm feeling. Well, I got a shirt underneath. No way I'm showing my arms. Yeah, but man, I'm feeling the buzz, baby. That's a topic for another time. But
no, I just need I got to have the proper polo, quarter zip, long sleeve, short sleeve. You have the full combo. Then maybe a bonus with some sweatpants or shorts.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, my wardrobe needs some
here with like a full Hornets like jogger suit, man. I'm pretty sure I owned one of those when I was like 10 years old. God, I'd love to see you come in with that teal jogger suit.
You know what I had? This is embarrassing, ridiculous. And I hate to even admit this live on the air, but when I was in middle school, I had snap away Hornets shorts that I wore to school.
Snap away shorts.
That's an absurd thing.
Okay, you're not talking about like the lower part of the leg coming off to make shorts. You're saying that at any moment you could have ripped these shorts off?
Yeah, just absurd. Just an absurd thing.
What was under the shorts?
Yeah, I mean,
Hornet Speedo.
That's it. That's all it was. So I was crazy. I would show up to school wearing snap away shorts.
Anything snap away. There was a trend, dude, when you and I were in like middle school, let's say late elementary school, middle school, where like if your pants could turn into something else, like that was just as cool as it got, man. If your pants could turn into shorts, if your pants could snap away, if your shorts could snap away, it was just like,
I don't remember anyone else having snap away shorts.
Look at the swag on that.
I felt like I was the only one. And I think there's a reason for that. That was not a good trend. It was not a good idea.
That's good, man.
Awesome. If you saw pictures, I mean, it's just sad. It's a sad state of Bryce in middle school. That's for sure. I
had so many obscure sports articles of clothing as a kid that I wish that I had held on to. So many weird jerseys and brightly colored shorts, and yeah, golly, they're all gone, and they should be. But boy, do I wish I still had some of them just stored away in my nostalgia box under my bed or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. There you go. There's some thoughts on NFL free agency. A couple more moves to be had. We're still wondering about, Kyler Murray is probably the biggest name. We talked about him last week on the show. In a little bit, I do want to talk more about the NCAA tournament and kind of this idea, did the NIL kill the upset? But before we do that, we'll jump into this week's devotional topic. And we're already getting comments. When did this become a fashion show? Get back to sports. That's probably good suggestion there. But
anybody, no. Anybody who tells me that sports is not a little bit about fashion is kidding themselves. Okay, because even as the most masculine of dudes, when we see like our favorite team come out in that alternate uniform, and you're just like, man, that looks fresh. And then if your next thought is like, I want to buy that uniform, I got to get another Hornets hat. Man, I missed that Randy Moss jersey that I had when I was a kid. So guys, men, this is a chance for us to express our fashion side in a safe and masculinely acceptable way. So I resent that last comment. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, it is funny how now all of a sudden we care what players wear on their way into the stadium. I do not, though.
I don't care about that.
You care about the jerseys.
SGA, I don't care about that.
Yeah, that was
he's the only
that
one
was something. Oh, it's funny. I was watching Inside the NBA the other day. They were giving Jalen Williams the hardest time about him wearing like some sort of coat, blanket type of thing. And my wife was listening to me watching this, and she's like, "They're so mean." It's like, that's part of the show. That's why it's hilarious.
Yeah, no, dude. Just let's queue up a fashion episode somewhere down the line. In the dog days of summer here, when we don't have much to talk about, let's get a fashion.
That's what you want.
Right,
that's what you want.
That's what I want. Sorry, Paul, and everyone else who's against my fashionista tendencies.
I'm the last person you want talking about that. All right, so March Madness is underway, and on Sunday, I happened to catch the conference championship game between Boston and Navy. And it was an awesome game. Or no, I'm sorry. That was the semifinals. It was an awesome game. It came down to a buzzer beater 3 and Boston beat Navy. And so it was just like this exciting game that I just happened to turn on. And then I was watching Queens, and Queens is actually in Charlotte. It's a small school.
Very small school.
They're actually in the process of merging with another school called Elon. But 4 years.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I know.
Okay, interesting. Keep going.
In some ways, administration wise.
Right, just teaming up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyways, Queens was taking on Central Arkansas. That game goes into overtime. Queens ends up winning the ASUN championship. They go to the big dance for the first time ever. And they just moved up from Division II to Division I back in 2022. So it's a pretty cool story. So anyway, I just happened to watch these games. But here was my big takeaway from these games. Nobody was watching. There were such small crowds for these games. And so I think it was at Navy, but there were like 1,700 people. And then the Queens ends up winning in front of just over 2,000 people. So these are small crowds. And what I love about the NCAA tournament is you get a mixture of small schools and big schools. So we've got the biggest conferences. We've got ACC with Duke and Carolina. You got the Big Ten with Michigan State, and everybody else. And then you've got all these small conferences. And as somebody who, I've been a Duke fan since 5th grade, but I went to App State, and we used to be in the SoCon. Furman won the SoCon. Now App is in the Sun Belt. Troy won the Sun Belt. You get this combination of big schools, small schools, and then they get to play each other in the big tournament. But the conference tournaments are in front of small crowds. And so just on before I jump into the topic, what do you watch any small schools? Is there any intrigue to the conference championships at least with some of these mid-majors?
Intrigue, absolutely. Do I watch? Certainly when I'm flipping through and I see it's a fourth quarter of a close game, and I love to see
second half.
Sorry. You're right.
You got to get back. You got to put your college basketball.
Come on, man. When it is the, you know what I mean. When it is the fourth quartile of a game, when we're coming down to like the 5-minute mark, and I see that it's a close game, I'm going to stick around and watch that. There are a few things more exciting in all of sports than a close basketball game at the end of the season. The team that I've been kind of into is the Long Island University Sharks, the LIU Sharks. They're going to make the tournament. It's already, even though they still have their conference championship left, they're playing a team called Mercyhurst, which sounds like the thing that you name your college when like two guys who are big donors can't agree on what to call the college. Like, well, let's just slap them together.
Yep.
Mercyhurst. But Mercyhurst, this is the year that they are transitioning from D2 to D1. And so I think there's some kind of obscure rule that they can't be in the NCAA tournament in that first year or until that changeover is complete. And so LIU is already in. They're the Sharks. And they do this incredible fins up thing when the opposing team is shooting free throws. Have you seen the fins up?
Somebody emailed me about it. So it's a cool thing.
There's one guy who seems to be kind of running this tradition where they shout fins up and slap their hands together above their head right before the opponent shoots a free throw. I love stuff like that, especially when it's in small arenas. But it's in Brooklyn, man. It's like this little arena just tucked away in Brooklyn that I think can seat maximum 2,500 people. They got 1,000 people at most at these games. And it's just, it's fun to watch. And it's fun to watch. It's cool how passionate the players are in spite of being in a small venue with a small turnout because they want to get into that NCAA tournament.
Absolutely. And so in some circumstances, like throughout the regular season, like I've been to a Davidson college game, and it's a small gym. I love a small gym. I mean, Cameron Indoor
It's
is
fun.
a small gym too. And so I'm not necessarily talking about like the small gyms that are designed
Talking about
to
the
be
attendance,
yeah. So there's just not a lot of people
the
there.
viewership.
But when I watched these two games on Sunday, I just noticed there were a lot of empty seats.
Right.
So nobody was there. And so I started thinking about this. Okay, nobody's watching. And yet the games are exciting. A buzzer beater 3. Are you kidding me? I kicked off my March Madness with a buzzer beater in a conference tournament, although a small conference tournament. But it's great. And so, but people weren't there to see it. They weren't there to watch it. But what did the players do? They still played with maximum effort. They're still out there, giving their all. They're still, doing the right things out on the court, even though there aren't as many people there to notice, and not as many people are watching. And the reality is, though, their coach is still watching. Their teammates are still counting on them, and they're actually preparing for the next opportunity. And so, although nobody was watching on Sunday, guess what? Queens, they're now going to the NCAA tournament, and they're going to be playing in front of a huge crowd with millions of people watching and tuning in whenever their game is, because we watch the entire tournament. Every game matters. We're all looking at our brackets. Make sure you go to unpacking.com/March. Fill out your bracket with us.
Get in on this challenge, baby.
Get in on it. And so even though initially nobody was watching, all of those, the way that they play, how they play, all of that factors into what's going to happen now when the spotlight's on them. And so will they be ready? Will they be prepared? For many of these schools, absolutely. And the challenge then becomes, now that they play in front of more people, they have to stay grounded and not worry about the bigger crowd, because they were playing basketball because they love basketball. They love playing for their school. They're representing their school. Even though nobody's there watching, they're representing their families, their schools, themselves, all that kind of thing. And so now all of a sudden you get to these bigger arenas, you look around and you go, oh man, now here's a bigger crowd. Now I got to start playing outside of myself.
Yeah.
But the teams that make the run are the ones that stay grounded. And they say, hey, we're just going to keep doing what we do. We play with the fundamentals. We're not worried about the crowd. And it doesn't let it get the best of them.
What's that great scene in the Hoosiers when they come into the big arena and they've made it to like the biggest stage, and the coach, Gene Hackman, I can't remember the name of the coach in the movie, he measures the dimensions of the floor. He has them measure the height of the basket. He says, hey, remember, we're playing the same game on the same court. The venue has shifted. So yeah, there is that. How do you stay grounded and stick to the fundamentals when the attention ramps up?
That's right. Absolutely. And so as we parallel this to our own lives, I just started thinking about this phrase, nobody's watching. Because in our own lives, there are plenty of times where nobody's watching. When we're home, nobody's home. We're maybe working remotely. Maybe we're having to get some things done, and nobody actually notices what we're actually doing. And the question becomes, do we operate with integrity? That regardless of who's watching, and even if nobody's watching, we still do the right thing. We still understand that we are representing ourselves, but more importantly, as followers of Jesus, we're representing Jesus no matter what. We're living for Jesus no matter what. Our love for Jesus is what drives us, whether people see us or they don't. And so how do we handle behind closed doors? How do we handle, maybe I can get away with this. Nobody's going to notice. Who really cares? I can do this, I can do that. And we give into temptations because nobody's watching. And to parallel this to these teams that say, no. Even though nobody's here watching, it's not a big crowd. No, we're still doing the right things. We're still going to pass, shoot, do what needs to be done. Are they going to not run back on defense because there's less people watching? No, they're going to still run back on defense. Does it mean now they got to run back on defense because they're playing in front of a bigger crowd? No. If they didn't run back on defense when there was no crowd, who's to think they're going to run back on defense now with a big crowd? Chances are they didn't win that game anyway, if that's the case. So just your initial thoughts on this.
I love this topic, man, and I love the way you're teeing up this conversation. I mean, we talked about it a few weeks ago in relation to the Olympics. I continue to believe that in spite of all of the money and hype and NIL and pomp and circumstance that surrounds so much of sports in kind of our modern, highly televised, highly social mediaized age. The thing that we love the most about about sports, one of the things we love most about sports is the simple, pure life lessons that you learn from like sports in its purest form. And I still just think that seeing some of these small and mid-major schools playing basketball at the end of the season, where the only thing that matters is the love of the game, winning the game, trying to make it into the tournament, you see some of the best and purest moments. And so many of those moments happen, at least originally, when no one is watching, right? They happen in front of a small crowd that just doesn't even measure up to the big, highly televised, highly hyped moments of some of these big schools, or certainly some of these professional sports. So this is a great topic, and there's a clear corollary to our own spiritual lives, our own lives as followers of Jesus.
And the word integrity gets thrown around a lot, I think. But how often do we actually consider the choices that we make when nobody's watching? And how often does the reality that nobody's watching actually affect kind of what we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so the encouragement as we look to Scripture is to choose integrity. And so here's what it says in Psalm 119, 1-5. Joyful are people of integrity who follow the instructions of the Lord. Joyful are those who obey his laws and search for him with all their hearts. They do not compromise with evil, and they walk only in his paths. You have charged us to keep your commandments carefully. Oh, that my actions would consistently reflect your decrees. And so that means anywhere, anytime, anywhere, always. That's the mentality. That's our attitude. It's not, oh, I can get away with this. Nobody's watching. And then we go to Colossians 3:23-24. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And I have to imagine, I'm my own boss. I've got a board of directors, but for the most part, people that work remotely, every day you've got a challenge of integrity, because your boss isn't breathing down your neck. He's not walking by your cubicle or your office to say, hey, are you working? He's trusting you to work from home. And so are we working for the Lord, working hard, heartily to whatever the task may be, whatever we're called to do, whatever we're getting paid to do? Are we doing it with all of our heart? Or, my boss isn't going to see this. I don't know. I can get away with this. And so I think it has to do with, obviously, our choices when it comes to sinful decisions, giving into temptation. What are we doing behind closed doors? How are we working when nobody's watching? And are we choosing integrity and working heartily for the Lord?
Yeah. I mean, don't you think that it's true, Bryce, for most of us, that most of the time no one really is watching, or very few people are watching, right? I mean, I think we live in this age of sort of influencers and views and clicks and how many eyes were on the thing that you did. And even I think I remember hearing a study a few years ago that how many young people, their desired vocation, their desired career when they grow up is that of influencer, right? YouTube celebrity. But for most people throughout human history, including until today, most of what we do is not being viewed by many other human eyes, if any. Right. And I'm fascinated by this word integrity, because I think it's one of those words that probably the first time you saw it was like on a poster of like your elementary school classroom, right? When you were learning the character traits and we probably were given a good definition of integrity when we were there. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching. But if you really think about the word and what it means living a life that is integrated, right? It comes from the word integration, and specifically related to that, that Psalm 119 passage that you just read, right? Joyful are people of integrity, people whose lives and whose hearts are oriented in the same direction, and they are they run parallel to, they are integrated with God's commands, right? I think anybody who's a Christian, anybody who's a follower of Jesus would say that maybe not what I want, but what I want is to follow God's commands and his good plan for my life more closely. Integrity means my heart, my desires, my joy, my work, my obedience are all more and more oriented towards what is best, namely God and what he wants for me, his kingdom and his righteousness. And so I love this word integrity, but I think when it's sort of when we disconnect it from that sense of like wholehearted orientation, what was the second verse that you read? Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all of your hearts. I think so many of us feel this sense of going through life with disintegrated, fragmented hearts that are running in 1,000 different directions after 1,000 different things. And what God desires for us is a single-minded, wholehearted integration with his kingdom and his righteousness, the things that he says are the very best. And so I love this idea of even when no one else is watching, your heavenly Father is watching, his eyes are on you. And what does it look more like to live more and more in a way that pleases him and is integrated with the things that he says matter the most?
Amen. Proverbs 5:21, for your ways are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all your paths. And so he sees, he's always watching. So we have to remember that. And here's kind of a confession for me as we talk about this topic. I'm big in integrity. I work for the Lord. I serve the Lord. I feel I'm not perfect, but I feel pretty good in that. The flip side of this, however, is that think about these teams that are playing in the conference championship in front of a small crowd. I bet they wish they had a bigger crowd. The guy that hit the buzzer beater 3 would have been awesome if that was in front of 10,000 people instead. How
exciting would that have been?
And he I'm sure he wanted more people. And if I'm honest, I often do things because I want more people to see what I'm doing, right? Or I wish that more people saw what I was doing. And then since my background's in radio and now we're doing a podcast, and I want more people to see what I'm doing. But I have to check my heart in that and go, wait, what is that motivation? What is that?
Right.
What is that about? And so for the guy, he hit a buzzer beater. It's awesome. Who cares how many people saw it, right? It's like, that's not what it's about. It's about him. He did the right thing. He hit the big shot. He did what he was supposed to do. And so for all of us, we have to consider, why are we so worried about, I want to get more people to see what I'm doing, or I got to get more likes, or I'm going to post, my picture specifically this way on Instagram so that I get more attention. Are we driven by that attention, by that applause, and where we're not even doing certain things unless we're getting the applause? And I'm guilty of that too, because there are oftentimes, I got to make sure that my wife sees what I'm doing. I got to make sure she sees that I'm doing the dishes so that I get the applause, so to speak, or the affirmation from my wife, versus just being a husband that serves my wife, regardless of if she's watching or not, me getting this task done or doing something nice for her. And so there's multiple ways of this. And so it still kind of goes back to integrity, but are we so worried about, I want more people watching.
Yeah.
I'm only going to do this if people are watching.
For sure it goes back to integrity, right? Because you have to do the heart work of drilling down to your sort of core why, your essential motivation, your deep desire, right? And so I think for many, many people, and this is certainly true in influencer culture, it can be true in a lot of other contexts, it can be true at home with our wife. If what we say is, I really need recognition and appreciation and fame on some level to validate what I'm doing, to make me significant, and I will feel insignificant unless people notice me and appreciate me and praise me for what I'm doing, that leads to an anxious or arrogant or otherwise disintegrated life, right? But if we begin from a place of, my Father sees me, right? I think I'm worried that maybe a lot of us hear that that Proverbs 5:21 verse, for your ways are in full view of the Lord, and we hear that with fear or shame, right? Almost like Santa Claus God, he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake, That's not what our Father is like. He's made us righteous in Jesus. We are good with him in Christ. And his eyes that are on us are first and foremost on us with love and with mercy, right? Now, he may have some conviction for us about how he wants us to change or live differently, but he begins with mercy and love, right? And if my heart becomes so secure in the reality of my Father is watching and he loves me and he has a good plan for me, and if we begin to live out of integration from that, then we can start to say, well, like, hey, okay, in this vocation that he's given me, I think that growing influence, growing reach is part of what, I want to do with this vocation. I want to use my influence, my words, my platform to honor God and share the gospel with other people. That's a dangerous place to be if you are a disintegrated and prideful and anxious person. But it's a good place to be if what you're moving out from is God's love for you and your love for him. And so, yeah, just important to say, you really have to drill down and examine some of those deep heart motivations to ask yourself, am I living with integrity for God's glory and his love? And from that place, is it okay for me to move out and want to have influence with my words and my actions on the larger world around me? I think that's an important distinction that you made there.
Absolutely. I want to go back to the word fear too, because I think that's key in this. Because, all right, if we think nobody's watching other than God, our view of God matters in those moments. Because if we view God as, oh, well, he doesn't really care, he'll show me grace, he'll forgive me, I'm still going to give into this temptation and I'm going to do what I want because he's the only one watching. Whereas we still want to have the proper fear of the Lord,
Right.
and honor him and revere him, be in awe of him, and understand, the holiness that he's called us to live as we live for him.
Yeah.
And so it's having that proper understanding of God is so full of mercy and love and grace. And so I want to respond with every aspect of my life, my whole heart, because I love him in response. And so I want to do the right thing, Lord. I want to follow you. I know nobody else is watching, but I know you are. Yeah. And you're the most important person to me. So, of course, I want to do what's right in your eyes. And so I think we have to, make sure that our heart is in the right place with that too.
Yeah, there's a type of fear that drives us away, makes us want to run and hide. Just like Adam and Eve, they sinned, they heard the Lord coming, and they were afraid, and they ran and hid. And then there is a holy reverence, a proper reverence that makes us want to come and bow before the Lord and submit our entire lives to him. And the difference between those two types of fear is really, really important, right? Reverence means bringing my whole life in reference to him, which is really just another word for integrity. Am I bringing my whole heart and my whole life into proper reverence to God? And so, I mean, can I tell you, Bryce, I think as we were preparing to talk about this topic today, I thought about one of my favorite passages in any Christian book. This really is on the short list for favorite things that I have ever read in a Christian book that's not the Bible. And it's from The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. The premise of The Great Divorce is that a group of people take a bus tour, a guided bus tour to heaven, to see what heaven is like. And sort of their tour guide on this tour is an angel, and the narrator of the book is one of these people who's on this tour. And there's this wonderful chapter. I went and looked it up. It's chapter 12 of The Great Divorce, where as he's conversing with this angel, he sees this woman come by. And she, of all of the people in heaven, she is the most beautiful. She's clothed in splendor, clothed in light. Animals are sort of dancing around her, praising her and singing to her. And she's just beaming with joy and radiant beauty and honor. And the narrator says, "Oh, who is that? She must be someone famous. She must have been a famous saint, a famous Christian." And the angel says, "Oh, you would have never heard her name. She never did anything famous in the world, but she was great in the eyes of the Lord because she was faithful, because she was holy, because she had integrity." I think about that passage all the time. If placed before you on the table was a bunch of attention and a bunch of praise and a bunch of fame from the world, or to hear your father say, "I see you and I'm pleased with you. Well done, good and faithful servant," which one would you really choose? And the sad truth is that for me, so much of the time, I would choose the fame, but I'm asking the Holy Spirit to reorient my heart so that I would desire the faithfulness, right? And so I'm just thinking about somebody who might be listening to this episode, a dad washing dishes late at night to serve his family, right? Somebody in a cubicle who's just trying to do their job faithfully, even though they don't get a bunch of attention or a bunch of praise for it. And I want them to hear, God sees you. Your Father's eyes are on you, and faithfulness is so much more pleasing to him than worldly fame. And that's where our integrity comes from. That's what it looks like to live wholly and wholeheartedly when no one is watching. And just to think, there are brothers and sisters in Christ that we have who are great in the kingdom of heaven, who will be clothed in splendor in the new heaven and the new earth, whose names that we have never heard, and who are just living quiet, faithful lives in the calling that God has given them.
Amen. It's powerful, man. That's beautiful. That's tremendous. And just, the question today, are we craving more applause, attention, and credit, and why? Like what is that? What is that about? And bringing our heart before the Lord and going, God, transform me, renew my mind, so that I do have that mentality that it is about faithfulness, regardless of who's watching. Nobody has to watch. Nobody has to see. It's not about that. And so here's what Jesus says in Matthew 6, 1 and 2, and gives us sort of kind of an example of this. But he says, watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. And so there's this tension that we feel in life too, because we want to do good things, but we want the attention. Hey, look at the good thing I did. Hey, look, I gave over here. I served over here. I did this. I did that. We want the attention. And so we have to shift away from that. But the tension here also is we also want to do things in life. We want to live a life of integrity. We want to serve the Lord and do good deeds that help others that sometimes will get attention. Mm-hmm. They will be noticed. And guess what? What do we do with that attention? It points to the Lord. Because we want people to see Jesus shine through us, that we are a light in this world. And so we want people to see something different in us. It's not about the size of the crowd. It's not about the, how many people, but the other reality to this conversation is people are watching. And although I downplayed the crowds for Queens and for Boston University, there were still thousands of people watching those players. They were still seeing them. They weren't the big crowds, but somebody was still watching them. Mm-hmm. Not to mention their family, not to mention their teammates. And so every day we still are interacting with people and people are watching. And sometimes, I've got to check my heart and go, okay, what are my daughters seeing? Are they seeing Jesus shine through me? Am I telling them about Jesus? And then is he shining through me to where they go, I want to know the God that my dad knows. I want to know about this God that I see my dad reading the Bible. And then he's different. He lives this out. Is that the case? Is that the connection that my daughters are making? And my wife as well. Oh, cool. Bryce is doing a podcast talking about Jesus. Is he living that out at home? Because they are watching. And so there's a lot of layers to this conversation as it is every week that we try to cover all the different layers. But there is this tension of, we still want to live this out and people are going to see it as well.
I like that you said that, Bryce, that there are layers to this conversation and sort of nuances and different paths and directions that you can take with this conversation. To me, what that reminds me of is I need to be examining those motivations of my heart, those deep desires and the big why for me as I'm living day to day. But I need to be doing that in a relationship with others. People who are listening to this podcast are like, oh man, this is stirring something up in me. The proper action step is to find a brother or sister in Christ and talk to them about it, right? So follow up with this conversation because you can unpack this topic in a face-to-face conversation with somebody better than we're going to be able to here in this 30-minute discussion, right? So you're doing a great job of just pointing our heart at so many different kind of focuses that we could dive into deeper. But I hope that people are following up with their brothers and sisters in Christ, with their local church on some of these topics as it stirs something up in your heart.
Definitely. And we have content that is designed for small groups.
For helping that.
So we've got weekly pack content that offers questions and additional kind of ways to take these topics to discuss them in a further way. And so, we're talking about, okay, if you're doing good deeds, you're not doing it. I'm not doing good deeds so that people will give me applause and attention. It's not about that. But as we go down to Matthew 5, verse 16, let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good deeds and moral excellence and recognize and honor and glorify your Father who is in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will be good deeds that nobody sees, that nobody knows about. Let's live with integrity. Let's honor the Lord in that way and serve him. There are going to be things that we do that a small group of people see, starting with our family, our close friends, our coworkers. Are we living with integrity and living for the Lord in those circumstances? And then all along the way, we have opportunities for our life to be a demonstration. Hey, this is God shining through me. So let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good deeds and moral excellence. They do. Oh, wow, this guy's awesome. He's amazing. No. And they recognize and honor and glorify your Father who is in heaven, because that's who we're living for. That's who this is about. So it's not about our own applause. It's not about our own. That's not what this is about. And so that's not what this life is about.
That's it. I mean, I think, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, the root question is your identity, your standing with God, upstream from the sort of the praise, the recognition that you get in this world, or does it stand below that in terms of the order of importance, right? If the thing that matters most to you that trickles down into everything else is, am I being recognized, acknowledged, and praised for the work that I'm doing in the world? That's always going to get us into messy situations. But if we start with, I have right standing with my Father because of Jesus, I'm righteous in Jesus, that's my fundamental identity, and everything else is downstream from that. And so if people see my good works, it's just going to point them back to Jesus. It's just going to point them back to God, right? They're going to see my good works and glorify God. I mean, that's really the root question. It's not wrong to desire to be recognized and even on some level to be sort of praised or esteemed for the good work that you do, if that is downstream from the glory that you want God to receive through you.
Amen. Absolutely. Last point, and we won't fully unpack this today, but as we wrap up this parallel, what about these teams? Queens. They go from playing in front of a few thousand people, and next week they're going to be playing in front of tens of thousands and millions of people
do to them? Yep.
Watching. And so for some of us listening today, you will have increased influence, audiences, crowds. Maybe it's a pastor that's listening today. Maybe it's somebody even at work. We're now
business leader, right?
Yeah, we're now all of a sudden you have more influence. Maybe you have a key role. Maybe you're a soccer coach. Maybe in your neighborhood you take on a leadership role. Whatever it may be. Maybe you're an elder at your church. How will you handle now this kind of next opportunity? Because those teams, like we talked about earlier, they have to stay grounded. Just because the crowd gets bigger, they still have to do the right thing. They still have to make the pass, hit the shot, and not worry about, oh, now I'm playing in front of this big crowd. Now I've got to change my game. No, if we always act with integrity when nobody's watching, well, now if more people are watching or we have more influence, we're still trusted in the Lord. We're depending on the Holy Spirit to empower us. We're still doing everything from humility, a place of humility, and to what you're talking about as far as what Jesus has done for me. I'm in good standing with him, and he's who I'm serving. He's who I'm living for. God, if you want more people for me to interact with, to serve, I'm open to that. But Lord, you've got to lead me and guide me in that. And again, it's not about the crowd. It's not about the applause. It's not about the size of the audience. We want to continue to be faithful with a little bit. And if it becomes a little bit more and God puts a little bit more on our plate, will we be faithful with that and trust him in that? So any final thoughts here, Tripp? It's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot here.
I think that's a great note to end on. It's a little bit of a cliffhanger, right? But that's a question to bring to the Lord and to other people. And I'm glad you challenged us that at the end there.
So even if nobody's watching, what will we do? Because the Lord is watching. And so what does that mean for how we live our lives every day? In front of people, behind closed doors. Man, it's a lot to contemplate and consider today. So I hope you're encouraged, and I hope one of these kind of angles resonates with you specifically today. So we'd love to know your thoughts. Already heard from somebody in the audience saying, "Hey, great message. I'm going to share this at our men's breakfast." So that's awesome. Keep share this encouragement. But when I wrote this devotional, I was pumped about it because it really resonated with me. Because like I shared earlier, I often want the attention, mainly from my wife. That's the most attention I want. But even out of that, it's like, I just got to serve my wife, period. I've probably mentioned that before on the show. I'm still working on it. God is still working on that in my life. Last topic today, as we wrap up the show, I teased this earlier, and we're going to miss next week's show where both of us have ministry events that we'll be attending. You can pray for both of us as we go. But this topic, as we head into the NCAA tournament, this Sunday is Selection Sunday. I love Selection Sunday. It's such an exciting, the show, the revealing of the bracket. It's tremendous. This year, though, will we see more of what we saw last year, which was a lot of chalk, limited upsets? Will that be the trend moving forward? And has the NIL situation, the transfer portal, the current state of college basketball actually killed the Cinderella story? Is this the end of kind of multiple Cinderella stories, big Cinderella stories? Is this it? What is your gut on that, Trip?
In general, I think that is probably a fair characterization of what we have seen in college sports over the last few years. Now, I'll say I think that it is more true in college football, where there's just something about the difference between football and basketball, where elite athleticism, at the end of the day, just having the biggest, most athletic guys on the field, all on one side of the ball, often largely determines the way that a college football game goes. And I still think you can see these magical moments in college basketball where a team of scrappy seniors beats the sort of young, flashy, athletic, future NBA prospect type teams. So I will say, I still think March Madness is magical because you can, one of those top 10-ish teams from throughout the regular season that we talked about can still be upset as like a 3 seed getting taken out by a 14 seed, So we see that all the time. And I share that concern, that sentiment that what NIL does is sort of, it sort of gathers all of the most elite talent and all of the most exciting players into a handful of teams, a handful of conferences. And so I do think the constant upsets that we used to see 20 years ago in the NCAA tournament, I don't think that we'll see them as much. And as you're drawing up your bracket, I think you're almost always a bracket that just chose the top seed down through every level of the tournament is going to perform better than a bracket that tries to predict upsets. And that's just the nature of the beast, And I think that's more true now than it has ever been.
And then the question for the audience is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Will you miss all the Cinderella stories? Or like I was talking about earlier, I think it's going to be Duke and Florida and Houston again. Like we're going to see some of these same teams competing that, are fighting for championships. Michigan's going to be in that mix. UConn's probably in that mix. It's Arizona. So if those teams are still around in the Elite Eight and the Final Four, we're going to see some great matchups of top teams that have some tournament experience from last year and are ready to roll again. But let me share this from ESPN. Their article is called "Did NIL Kill the Upset?" And they said, last year's tournament saw only 13 outright underdog wins, tied for the fewest since 1985. And so for the first time in modern history, 3 consecutive tournaments have passed without multiple double-digit seeds reaching the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a limit there. And then in the 2025 tournament, the Elite Eight consisted entirely of top 3 seeds, matching 2007 for the chalkiest quarterfinal round ever. All indications are that this is going to happen again. And now we just have to sort of figure out if we like it or not.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to me. Is that actually a good thing? I mean, sports is sort of optimized to get the best teams playing each other in the most important games, and so maybe you could argue, well, that's what's happening, But I do think there's just something wonderful about the history, the tradition of the NCAA tournament that involves exciting upsets, and I think it's probably fair to expect that we will see fewer upsets on any given year because of what NIL is doing in terms of consolidation of talent.
I will say, as I think back, I've watched the tournament for so many years, and I remember some of the great teams. And when I first started watching, it was UCLA and Arizona. I can remember those starting fives, but a lot of my memories are attached to the Cinderella stories. the St. Peters, the Florida Gulf Coast, Florida Atlantic. Now Dusty May coaching up in Michigan. But I like some of those surprises, and I do long for that. But I'm also a Duke fan. They're the number one team. So I want to see them go far and not get upset by Mercer or Lehigh. I don't like those teams. I will say that. So I like a little bit of both. And I like tight games, close games. That's what I'm rooting for. Even if the better team or the storied program wins, if some of these smaller schools, your boys Long Island, if they make it interesting and make Kansas sweat a little bit, that's a great thing. Actually, I like when I always root against Kansas. Sorry, Luke. So I always like seeing that happen. But anyway, Trip, great show. Enjoy the March Madness. We will be back in a couple weeks to recap the first weekend.
That first weekend, we talk a lot about best sports moments of the year every year, Bryce. But that first weekend, that first Thursday, Friday in particular,
it's the best.
It is the absolute best time of the sporting year for my money. And so I just hope everybody has a great first weekend of NCAA tournament action.
So speaking of integrity, just tell your boss you're not working Thursday and Friday.
I think they should be national holidays, dude.
You're watching basketball.
I'm going to have as many screens in front of me as possible. I won't be working, and I think that should be sort of nationalized. Like everybody should get that opportunity if they want that.
It's built into the holiday. It's a holiday at Unpacking It.
It helps that the weather is becoming beautiful, right? Yeah, it helps that the weather is becoming beautiful as well. So there's just nothing better than like a great spring day. Go sit outside with your iPad and watch a few basketball games on a Thursday afternoon. It feels so good, and that's absolutely what I'll be doing this year.
Yeah, don't pretend like you're working. You're not working. You're watching basketball. Yeah, it's a day of basketball.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Receive it as a gift and rest and watch some basketball. That's good.
There you go. For Trip, I'm Bryce. I'm a sports fan who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans who follow Jesus together with integrity, even if nobody's watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy March Madness. Enjoy the NFL free agency frenzy, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Unpacking It podcast.